Hey guys, what's up? This is Evan from Stock Music Musician, and today I have a review of the new Reason Synth Objekt. Put simply, I think this is the best synth that Reason Studios has ever released. I'm going to get into that in more detail in this video. First, I'm going to give you some sound demos of Objekt. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. I'm going to walk you through some of its features, and finally just kind of share some of my concluding thoughts on it. And at the end, we'll also cover some of the most frequently asked questions about Objekt. And as a special offer to you, I want to let you download my free Reason mixing template. I'll put a link down below. Grab it there. It'll help you speed up your mixes because it includes all sorts of routing and some of my favorite effects settings built in as send effects. It buses things in the right way so you can get started with a great mix really quickly. So just click that link down below to grab your free Reason mix template. So let's listen to a few of these demos of Objekt, and you'll kind of hear what it can do. I want to note that every single sound in every one of these demos is made by Objekt, whether it's the drums, the synths, the acoustic bass, the cymbals, the pads. It does it all. This synth is a serious synth. I feel like some of the things that Reason Studios has come out with in the past couple of years has been less than serious. This is on the opposite side. This is something that sound designers, producers, just regular people are going to be using. Everybody can find a use for Objekt. So let's take a quick listen. So there you hear like these really cool percussive sounds, a great bass sound, a great Rhodes sound. The drums on this track feel okay to me. This probably wouldn't be my number one just straight up drum kit choice for a synth, but these are all synthesized. You can tweak it, and to be fair, you'll hear some other demos where the drums sound great. This also does like percussion type drums really well, which you'll hear a little bit later. It does cymbals and crashes and things really well. And it does mystical type percussion that doesn't even exist really well. Does it do straight up hip hop drums well? It's probably the one thing that I would say this doesn't excel at. But you can get a pretty cool sound, for example, if we turn on the gate here, so it really chokes it off. Bass. So that's sort of example one. Now let's listen to something that's a little more like EDM style. And this again, every sound is Objekt. Great plucks, great pads. This bass just growls wonderfully. Love that lead here. But also, the drums on this sound really good. So let's take a listen. That kick and snare are just, you could rip that right out of like Billie Jean or something. Those are fat, rhythmic, great tom sounds. You got this cool little metallic sound there. Just kind of brings it together. And we put it all together. And again, none of this is really mixed. This is just the stock presets with a little tweaking of Objekt. But I want to give you a real sense of how flexible this device is. It's just really, really great. Now let's listen to the third demo, which is kind of more of like a meditative type track. And we'll hear even this. Pads, more naturalistic percussion. How cool is this wind chime like effect is being generated? I think we need to talk a little bit about what Objekt is and what it does. So Objekt is a modeling synthesizer, which means that it physically models sounds. It does not mean that it's like using sine waves, square waves, that sort of thing to synthesize sounds, and it's not doing subtractive synthesis. Instead, it's doing modeling synthesis, which is way over my head. I'll give you the best explanation I can do of it, but this is unlike anything else we are used to. It is a really cool and powerful sound, and it is very well implemented here. That is why you get these much more naturalistic tones all from one synthesizer. Whether that is something realistic like these wind chimes, this mellow tongue synth, which I just always keep coming back to. This is a great preset here. Kind of a cloud drum. Pads, it does it all. So, how does it work? This is the very high level explanation. I'll make a video down the line where I really do a full walkthrough of how to use Objekt. But the long and short of it is you can kind of imagine that it is like an acoustic guitar, for example, where you've got strings which resonate, and you've got the body, and you've got something that strikes the strings. And when you put those three things together, you get a lot of different tones. So for example, if you play an acoustic guitar with a pick, it sounds different than if you play it with your fingers, or even if you play it with a hard pick versus a soft pick. If you play it towards the front of the sound hole versus towards the bridge, you're going to get a different tone. If you were to play it with a bow or an E-bow or any number of things, those will all change sort of the striking tone of the instrument. And that is what this exciter section does. This exciter section simulates the striking. So this is how hard and how much velocity affects it, what the frequency of that strike is, and the clickiness of it, and how hard the striker is. You can also, let's say you want something more diffuse, like imagine the difference between hitting a drum with a drumstick versus like a soft mallet. You could turn the diffuse setting on and make it so that it's wider. You can change the shape of the head, kind of the higher percentage, the wider it is, and how kind of diffuse the impacts are. Or you can have it be triggered by noise, like these pulses and stuff, which I'll make a big video on all of this later. But essentially, these are kind of how you simulate the striking of the strings. These are all then can impact also. There's an EQ for it, so you can choose, which frequency is the primary exciter frequency and how wide of a Q there is and how much that goes in. Then you can have two different sets of strings, sort of, or objects, whether this is a drum head, a metallic thing, a string being plucked, whatever, that are here. Object 1 and Object 2, you can turn them off and on separately. And this basically is where a lot of the magic comes in. You have the ability to turn on each of these resonances in turn, on or off. so that each one of these is a frequency, right? You see here, this is tuned to 0.74, but you can pull this up or down, and that will affect not only the tone that's being generated by this first sound, but then each of them all interact in their own ways. You can activate keyboard tracking for them or turn it off. Keyboard tracking just basically means if you hit a different key on the keyboard, will that impact the frequency or not? So that can be useful, but you don't always need it. And then each one of these has their own gain. You also have the ability to master tune each one of these objects and have basically whether or not they're coupled together and influence each other. And you can do a crossover so they only affect each other at a certain frequency range, but then at other frequency ranges, they don't. That's all really confusing. But the simple way of going about it is just they have presets here for bells, glass, objects, metal, skins, strings, wood, all of that. And you can use those as your starting place and then tweak it from there using this really handy randomize function where you can select if you want to modify object 1 or modify object 2 or both or modal as well. And then you can choose just go boom. And you can choose the percent you want to randomize and go again and again, kind of re-rolling your own sound. Other things to realize is that each of these objects has their own set of not global, but characteristics that apply to everything within them. So how long the decay time is, how you dampen the frequency ranges, which is not quite an EQ. This kind of affects how they resonate with each other. Then you have sort of how much the frequency disperses, how much pitch is affected, and how much collision occurs. So like, let's say you are playing a slap bass, right? There's a lot of collision there because the string is actually hitting the fretboard. That's sort of what this collision section maps to. You have a mixer for how much of the modal sound versus the exciter gets in. The modal section is probably too complicated to get into now, but this is just another way of shaping the sounds. As you go over to here, then you have a mixer for what sounds are actually going to the volume. So if you want object 1, object 2, the modal, and how much. Also their pan and their width. Over here you have the traditional effects section and reason. You have EQ, which is really what you want to be using globally to affect it or run it into effect. Distortion with a bunch of different options. Compression, delay, and reverb. And as always, you can reorder them. You also have down here a really advanced mod matrix, more than you see in most of the Reason instruments. For example, there's a black key versus white key option, which I don't really recall seeing before, and single key mapping, which these are things that you would more see in a combinator. There's also this really cool feature called external in, which essentially allows you to use any sample or loop as the exciter. If we flip it around then, you can see there's a spot for that on the back. And then you've got CV out, CV gate out, and you've got one CV, CV in and CV in and gate in. And you've got CV inputs 1 and 2, CV outputs 1 and 2. Not a big deal that there's only a limited number because you can just drop it in a combinator and get a lot more CV through there. Let me show you that external in feature real quick. So if we go to this mellow tongue here, told you I really like it. So let's solo it and listen. Let's just turn it up. So I'm just playing chords with it. That's what it would sound like normally. But instead I have this sort of drum loop here, which is essentially going tss, 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 tss. And let's just plug that directly in so you can hear it. So this is the drum break. And now let's listen one more time and you can hear how that is triggering this chord progression, making it something completely different than it was. And if we were to affect the pitch of this or something, or the gate. So you have this whole other world of sounds, which brings me to why this is such a powerful synth. Basically, I think people have only scratched the surface. This instrument comes, I think, with like 500 patches to begin with. It's going to keep adding more, and we're going to need them because it's complicated. It is really complicated. I've played around with it a lot over the past few weeks, and I'm just scratching the surface. I'm sure there's some gearheads out there that are really going to take to this. For a lot of us, I think we're going to not struggle, but just have a lot of fun exploring how to use this, because this is unlike anything else that we've had in Reason. So that is not a reason to shy away from it. I think I embrace the fact that for the first time in a long time, Reason Studios made a go-to synth. This is something people will want. I don't care if you don't use Reason. This is a reason to get Reason. This synth is that good, and it's that unique. And it opens up this world of sounds that we don't normally have. Once you have it start interacting with things like loops and samples, it's just going to go off the grid. Honestly, I think it's also a reason for wants to justify perhaps Reason Plus, just because of all the patches that'll come out for it. Or at some point, we're going to need even more patches because this is difficult to make tracks with. But this includes everything you need to create incredible sounds. And one thing that you may notice here is this pitch and analyze and fix button. So I guess because this type of synthesis is just so out there, like your frequencies don't always end up being true to C. So I've just tweaked this a little bit. And if we go, what it will do is basically analyze what you're playing and see how much it has drifted from the true C that it should be. And then you can fix it so that it goes back to C once you've created a patch or something of your own, which is really helpful because otherwise it's not going to sound like it's in key. All in all, I'd say this is a 9 out of 10, a 10 out of 10 maybe even. I don't think they could have simplified it anymore. The interface looks complicated, and this is complicated. Like, this is not a beginner synth, but it is powerful. Even if you are a beginner, though, you can just start adding patches in and get great sounds. You don't need to tweak this. These sounds are really good. Let me just show you some of the library of sounds they've got on here, right? If we look, bells all the way to tomorrow, pluck strings through Saturday, synths and keys galore, brass and wind. These bass sounds these are really some of the best acoustic bass sounds I've heard. Tons of drums. All sorts of percussion. It's just, we're scratching the surface of it, and I am really excited to see what people come up with this. All right, so here are two of the most frequently asked questions about Objekt. First, is Objekt a standalone synth? The answer to that is no. Objekt requires Reason in order to be played. Reason is the host. Objekt is a synth that plays inside of Reason. You can use Reason as a plugin in any DAW. So Objekt is compatible with any DAW, but you have to use it within the Reason plugin, meaning you have to own Reason, and then you can own Objekt. The second most frequently asked question is Objekt included with Reason? The answer to that is not really. So first, there are two ways of getting access to Reason. First, you can buy an outright license, or you can subscribe to Reason Plus. If you buy the outright license, that includes Reason 12, and you can access it forever, but within the subset of synths available for Reason 12, Objekt is not a stock device, so you would have to separately purchase Objekt. On the other hand, if you subscribe to Reason Plus includes every synth developed by Reason Studios for Reason, and so that monthly fee will get you access to Objekt. So if you're a Reason Plus subscriber, you can access Objekt included in your monthly payment. But once you stop making your monthly payment, you will no longer have access to Reason or to Objekt. Hope this clears things up. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think about Objekt in the comments and whether or not you've had a chance to try it out. If so, what's your favorite feature? See you in the next video.